Good morning and welcome to today's NENS webinar, which is entitled Friend Zoned. Now let me introduce our speakers. James Carroll is a founder and principal at Hackett Cyber. He is a professionally trained ethical hacker and penetration tester. When not hacking his clients' networks, James is a frequent speaker and trainer at cybersecurity industry events. He also speaks frequently at industry events with non-technical senior management and leaders. James, welcome. Great to have you
Thank you.
back.
Glad to be here.
Okay. And Michael Koukourlakos is CEO at New England Network Solutions. He has been an IT professional for over 20 years. As an engineer, Michael focused on enterprise networking and security, and today he spends much of his time guiding businesses on IT and cybersecurity strategy. Michael, welcome.
Thank you, Jed.
And let's turn things over to James and get into today's content.
Well, thanks everyone. Glad to be here. Glad to be presenting. Today I have a presentation that it's all very new content, and it's in response to a lot of the things that we've seen really since the pandemic and some of it pre-pandemic regarding how attackers are getting into a lot of customer and company networks. And I call it friend zoned, and it's basically how social media can get you hacked and how attackers are utilizing this information and what their avenues are, and most importantly, what you can do as a company and as a consumer to help protect you and your business from hackers. So we'll jump right in here with some introductions. I'm James, founder and chief hacker principal at Hackett Cyber. What we do is we do penetration testing, offensive security, cyber services. We try to hack our customers before the hackers actually do it. And a lot of them would rather have us come in, find deficiencies before an attacker does, because we're not going to steal data, we're not going to sell data. We're going to tell them what they need to do to help protect their environment. On the right there, that is our human resource officer, Duke. Duke is great at his job. I have to introduce him because it's windy in Syracuse today. He might bark. He might make a little bit of an appearance. So got to make sure he gets his proper introduction. 4-year-old golden doodle. He does bite. Don't like strangers, people like that. Don't get near him. I love sharing this story of how I started hacking. I get asked this all the time from customers, from participants in trade shows. And it's one of my favorite stories to tell because it started out doing with what I loved to do as a kid, which was play video games. And I played a game that was called Halo 2, super popular video game in like 2005, 2006. And what I did is, I wasn't that good at the game, admittedly. I was average, but the problem was I wanted to get to the highest level. And to get to the highest level, you have to win by beating other people online from all over the world. And I kept losing. My level was going down. I was like a level 20. I think the highest was a 50. And I'm like, how am I going to get to level 50 not being good at this game? And I'll never forget, I was online, I was Googling like how to increase your level in Halo, how to cheat in Halo. And I came across this forum called 7 Sins. And I clicked on it, and it was this guy, he was in the UK, and he had a forum post, like back when forums were huge. He had a forum post like, hey, this is how you can always win in Halo. And I'm just reading it, and I'm like, he's like, you download this program, you do this, you click this button, he had a video of it. And I'm like, I think I can do this. Like, I'm okay technically. What it was denial service attacks. So you're effectively turning off people's internet, which back then wasn't a huge deal. Now is a felony, so don't do it now. But I would go in and I would basically match people online that I would play against, and I turn off their internet. And if they have no internet, they can't play, they quit out, and I would always win. I'd win every single time. So I won, like I went from like a 20 to a 50 in like 3 weeks. And Microsoft investigated it and like, hey, how come people keep quitting out of this person's game and he keeps winning? And I got a lot of accounts banned and credit cards banned and my IP address banned and my dad's network banned from a lot of things. So yeah, for me, it was fun. For him, he was like, how come I can't get at the bank site anymore? How come how come Verizon keeps calling me and telling me that our IP is blocked? I'm like, I have no idea. I have no clue, Dad. So that's how I started hacking. To me, it was just fascinating, like thinking back on it, how someone like me, and even in this day and age when there's way more tools out there, could be very low technical, like not a whole lot of technical skills, but could cause that much, I guess you could call it damage, right? That much interference with someone's network by just clicking buttons and following an online tutorial. These are some of the tools we used back then, like Cane Enable was an old school Windows hacking tool, Zone Alarm Pro. That was actually a firewall that we used to choke off the connection to the other players. So just if you're interested in it, right, you can check it out. I don't really recommend it, but they're still viable tools even 20 years later, but they're great. And that leads me into my next topic, which was what was my first experience with a scam. And it was again on Xbox, and I think I was 13 or 14 back then. And I was playing a game, and my friend messaged me, and the message looked something like this, where it was like, message to all friends, everyone go to this link, enter your information. I just got 1,600 Microsoft points doing it. And this was a kid I know all the time. Like I went to school with him. His name was Mark. So I'm like, what? That's weird. So I texted Mark. I think I AIM'd him, and I was like, hey man, like, what's this thing on Xbox? Like, oh, I don't know. My account got hacked. Like, don't click the link. Don't do it. But it was like the first chain scam, that really one of the first ones outside of an email that I've ever seen, where attackers would basically message all of Mark's friends, right? If he got 3 people to go and enter their password, he would take their accounts, message all of his friends, right? It's just a snowball effect of people getting hacked. And what the scam would do is they'd get into your account. There's a credit card saved on your account, and usually it's like a kid's parents' credit card, and they would end up like buying Microsoft points and merchandise and T-shirts, right? And just a bunch of like stupid Xbox Microsofty things. So now you can buy game, you can buy everything on the Xbox store. But back then it was pretty limited. But yeah, I mean, if you can multiply this by 3-4x across a bunch of hacked accounts, and you're talking thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars that a kid with an email or a kid with a website can just start spamming people out and scamming people with. And very low sophistication with pretty high damages. That's what I picture Mark's face looked like when he found out he got hacked. I don't know if that's a pretty decent representation of what he actually looked like back then, but yeah, he was not a happy camper. His mom was really mad. I'll never forget that. But good old Xbox hacking. And like, it's funny because like when I go to industry events, I talk to other hackers, and I'm like, how'd you get into this? And a lot of them say video games. Like, I was playing, Call of Duty, or I was playing Xbox, I was playing PlayStation or PC gaming, and I figured something out. And it's like really a big way. So like, my parents are always like, all you did when you were a kid was play video games. Like, look at me now. I can hack people. Like, you can't complain too much. I could have been worse. I could have been on the streets. I could have been drinking, but no, we're playing video games back then. So we're going to switch gears here to talk about what I like to call the static threat landscape. So this is what threats have not changed in the past 10, 15 years. And the one that we see that's been constant, that's been constantly effective, and that I don't think is going to change anytime soon or really get any less common, is phishing. And the reason for that is because, I mean, if you think about, you can go to any email, like your personal email, go to the spam folder. You can look at all these pathetic phishing attempts that are in there, like absolutely atrocious phishing attempts. But the fact is, they wouldn't be sending those if it didn't work, right? It's like when you're driving down the, downtown Boston, and you see a homeless guy, and like, how is this guy? It's negative 20 degrees. He's on the corner begging for money. It's like, he's doing it because it works. Like, people are giving him money. People are doing that. It's the exact same thing with phishing. So every time you see a phishing email, you think to yourself, man, like, people still fall for Nigerian prince scams. People still think they won the lottery in Belarus. It's because people are falling victim to it. I have friends that work at banks, and I have customers that are banks, and they're like, you wouldn't believe how many people walk in here and they try wiring money to foreign countries because they think they won the lottery, or they try wiring money to a guy in Nigeria because it's going to be their long lost husband. It's like, it happens every single week. And you just got to think about it, right? If people are doing that, like these ones on the screen right here, like the fake invoice with a PDF or a fake Amex notification, these are going to get them every single time. And these keep getting more and more sophisticated, and that's really kind of the phishing arms race that we're seeing, where companies are increasing their defenses and their knowledge and their training, but hackers are getting better as well. And I don't see this going away anytime soon. And they're always going to target emails, right? That's what you see with phishing. And we go over a bunch of other phishing examples here, and social media phishing examples that we're going to dive into that are pretty interesting, and we see a massive uptick in them. So why has phishing and all these attacks worked in the past? The number one reason is because humans have been Swiss cheese. 10 years ago, if I did a phishing engagement, we would get 50 to 60% of people to enter their password. Since then, there's been a lot of things that have occurred, compliance, right? A bunch of initiatives to help get people more trained and better trained that have helped that. We talk about corporate security, a decade ago. it looked a lot like this, right? It was a Cheeto holding the door closed. It was just enough to maybe stop a moderately strong gust of wind from opening that door. But the second someone poked on it or opened that up, everything was gone. And but this was like right when I first started doing this professionally about a decade ago. And I always reminisce with some of my other peers. I'm like, man, remember back when we like didn't have to bypass antivirus and like people just clicked on links. We didn't have to like do all this work now. Like it was just easy. It was like shooting fish in a barrel. But now it's becoming more difficult. But there's still a long ways to go for a lot of for a lot of companies. So what has contributed to that? One thing is spam filters. Spam filters have gotten better. You look at things like Mimecast, Proofpoint. There's a bunch of others out there, but from a professional perspective, I know that if I'm phishing a company or we're engaged to hack a company, if they're using a professional enterprise spam filter, it makes our lives a lot harder. Like it'll do things like block newly registered domains, scan the links that I'm sending them. Sometimes it'll just block my email altogether and we can't even get it to get unblocked. These tools help tremendously in defending against phishing and social engineering based attacks. We look at technologies, right? There's a bajillion new things that have come out. These are just ones that popped into my head when I was doing these slides, but we've got things like next generation EDR, SentinelOne, Cylance, Carbon Black, CrowdStrike. These help protect endpoints, laptops, machines, servers from malware. And it does this by looking at behavior, right? Say, hey, this user doesn't normally do this at 1 a.m. What's going on here? Something weird is happening. It'll block instead of just relying on signature-based detection and things like that. Training programs. So we've seen a huge increase in like KnowBe4, for example, where it's ongoing training. So every week, every quarter, right? You might get a phishing email from your company, and if you click on it, you have to be enrolled in more training. So it's continuous training. It'll update, every month with new threat vectors and new emails and what the industry is doing. And this has played a big part into, at least when I go into a company and I do an assessment and I try to fish them, like, man, these guys got really good. Like, oh yeah, we use Wombat, we use KnowBe4, we use a product like that. And it's helped a lot to really increase that awareness and make sure people are aware of the different phishing emails and campaigns that attackers are sending out. I think one of the biggest drivers for increased security has been compliance requirements, right? If you're in California, the CCPA, HIPAA, ISO 27K, I mean, they're not getting any less stringent. They're becoming more strict, and they're covering a lot more businesses now. So, 5 years ago, if I called, a manufacturing company, I was like, hey, I'm James, I do pen testing. We help people with security. They'd be like, why would I ever need to do that? Now, a lot of them have been hacked. A lot of them know someone or know another, manufacturing company that might have been hacked, and they take this a lot more seriously. And a lot of that's because of these requirements and these regulations. If you're a small to medium-sized business, cyber insurance requirements are becoming more and more stringent. I know when we applied for cyber insurance 3 years ago, it was a pretty short questionnaire, nothing crazy. I just got done doing it in October. And it was like a 13-page questionnaire. They wanted to know every endpoint product we're using, if we had two-factor on everything, a result of our penetration test. They wanted so much documentation from us. And I talked to my agent. I'm like, this is insane. He's like, yeah. He's like, the problem is for insurance companies is for every dollar they take in for cyber, they pay out $3. So the only way they're going to make money on this is if they reduce the amount of people they're insuring and reduce the risk of those people, make sure that they're only taking applicants who will probably not get breached. So, and I've had other customers that are like, yeah, we couldn't put two-factor on our ERP system and our cyber insurance carrier just denied us. Like if you don't have two-factor on everything, you're done. So there are like game changer or like insurance ending decisions that can be made that if you don't have that in place, they actually won't even cover, which is crazy. But these are the drivers that have really, in the past decade, changed a lot of the security and bettered a lot of companies' security. I always love to look at venture funding as a way of saying like, what do companies like where is money going? And if you look at cyber venture funding, it's been crazy. I mean, in 2020 there was 7.8 billion in reported VC capital going into cyber insurance companies, which just proves that there's a problem. That problem is that what we have is not good enough, and we need to develop better tools, better processes, better procedures, better software to bring company and customer security to that next level. And it's not stopping, right? This is going up and up and up and up and up. So that's a really big contributor. And to an extent, like I always like to think about it this way, it's an arms race. Like you think about China and Russia and all these threat actors in different countries that are hacking US companies. It's an arms race. We're trying to develop products and security faster, and they can develop offensive weapons. And to an extent, right, we have a lot more resources, a lot more money invested, and they're able to bypass it with 10-year-old laptops and 16-year-old kids. And the reason for that is because they only have to be right once, right? Hackers only have to be right once. Your products and your EDR have to be right every single time. And that's why people are like, oh, you must have a hard job. I'm like, I only got to be right once. Like you guys got to be right every single time. You got the hardest job. I just got to be right one single time to get in. And that's what hackers are finding. That's what a lot of companies are finding out every single day. All right, talking about the new threat landscape, we talked about phishing and some of the static threats out there. The new ones we're seeing, and I call it IA or initial access, how hackers are gaining initial access into networks is through social media engineering. They're turning to things like dating sites, social media and networking platforms, chat functions to get their initial payload or get that initial communication with an employee. And they're doing it on both business devices and personal devices. And Teams has been huge for this. What attackers are figuring out is, well, now we got to deal with spam filters, and now we got to deal with, EDR products. We got to deal with other email restrictions and whitelisting and blacklisting, and like it's hard to get a spam email or a phishing email through a gateway like that. So like, well, I can just go on Microsoft Teams. Everyone has a Teams account, and I can just message them this on Teams. Teams doesn't do all those restrictions, right? Teams doesn't do any of that. So that's what they're doing. They're turning to these online social media platforms to send malicious documents and send malware to employees because they know it has a much higher probability of getting to that person than sending an email. And that's huge. And it's not just Teams, right? We got Zoom, LinkedIn, and we go into examples of each one of these during this presentation in case studies of how people have gotten hacked using these, doing this stuff. Tinder is big too, right? Don't think it's just corporate stuff. A lot of personal stuff has led to corporate data breaches. So Teams phishing, there's really two ways hackers are taking advantage. One is through actually a phishing email that looks like it's from Teams. So if you're on Teams or really any chat app and you miss a message, a lot of times like later that night, it'll be like, hey, this is what you missed today. And I'll be like, Joe sent an email that said, please submit your report by Wednesday. There's a button to reply in Teams. Well, if you're like, oh my God, I didn't know I had a report due by Wednesday, and someone impersonated Joe, you hit reply in Teams. What that's going to do is going to open your web browser, say log into your Teams account. You go to log into that Teams account, that password goes to an attacker. So we're seeing a lot of that. The other is actual phishing in Teams, where what happens is someone creates an account, they pretend to be a manager or a vendor or a partner. They'll create a team chat or a team project, and they'll say, hey, this is the invitation to it. You can open that in Teams, you join it. They start sending malicious documents like, oh, here's the project plan in PDF in Teams. You open it. Next thing you know, you've installed malware on that computer. Zoom phishing is, honestly, in my opinion, probably the most common, but as well as the most lethal form of phishing. And the reason for this is a lot of companies aren't using things like single sign-on. So they might use like Gmail for their email and then Zoom for their conferencing, or Outlook for their email and Zoom for their conferencing, where what attackers are doing is they're like, well, I can just create a Zoom account. I can pretend to be anyone I want, and they'll just send a Zoom calendar invite to someone. So an example was, this was a company we did. They an employee got a Zoom calendar invite from a manager. I think it was the CEO, and it was for an annual review. So this time of year is like ripe for that kind of stuff. They joined it. It had a picture of the person, the manager, and they typed in chat like, hey, my mic's not working. Just give me 10 minutes. While I'm doing that, download your review and we can discuss it when I get the mic working. So he actually sent a Word document through chat. The person downloaded it, opened that, infected their computer. And we see this happen pretty frequently. And when a lot of times it's in very highly secured environments, like big banks that have a lot of rules. Well, a lot of them whitelist these apps. Like they say, you need to communicate with customers and marketing teams, and they'll say you can use Zoom, and a lot of these documents get smuggled out through these different social media and conferencing platforms. Zoom also has a chat feature as well. So you can register a Zoom account, look someone up, send them a chat request, and you can send documents, files, right, links through chat. Once again, bypassing any email restriction and just getting to their inbox and getting to the device through Zooms and chat. I'm a big Slack fan, admittedly. I mean, it's a pretty great tool for productivity, especially if you're like a SaaS company or a high tech company. The issue with Slack is that there's been an increase in what's called Slack phishing. I think they call it slishing. And what attackers are doing is they're impersonating different plugins. So on Slack, the beauty of it is it integrates with almost everything. Like you can install plugins and add-ons for it. So like a lot of people have like HubSpot or their calendar or their email or their project management system all integrated right within Slack. And every like right before this meeting, 10 minutes away, it's like, hey, you got a Google Calendars messages me on Slack. Your meeting starts in 10 minutes. Well, every now and then it'll, my access will expire and it'll say, you need to click on this link to refresh this access. There's actually been reports of attackers creating Slack accounts, calling that account Google Calendar, putting the logo as the Google Calendar logo, and messaging people like, please click this link to reconnect your Google account. And people see it, they think it's Google, they click on it, enter their password, and then their account can get compromised that way. So pretty genius ways to do this, kind of phishing in social media exploitation, I guess you could call it, but very, very effective. This is the most common phishing that we've seen for social media. It's Instagram phishing, and it affects people or personal accounts a lot more than corporate, although we do see some corporate accounts that have gotten taken over. And I mean, if you're on Instagram enough, I'm sure you have a friend at some point, like over the weekend, one of my friends that I went to college with, I talk to him a lot. He's one of those guys that posts everything on Instagram, gym selfies, you name it. And I'm on there one day, it was on Friday, and I'm looking, and he starts posting all this crypto stuff, like a screenshot of his bank account, like, oh my God, I just made like $85,000 in 6 hours investing in, like Robin crypto, message this person for investment tips. And I'm like, I know this. First of all, I know this guy doesn't invest in crypto. Second of all, like I know he doesn't have 85 grand in his bank account. Like I know where he lives. There's just no way. So I messaged him like, hey man, I think your Instagram got hacked. He's like, yeah, it did. Like they hacked, I clicked on a link, entered my password, they got into it. I'm trying to get it back with Instagram. And then like every day they would post like more things. And then like the last post that they made before it got disabled was a video of a like brand new Mercedes. He's like, just bought my dream car thanks to Robin Crypto. Like message this person to get invested. And I just texted him a text. I'm like, hey man, that's a nice car you got. He's like, I hate you. But Instagram finally took it down. It took an entire week. So it let this account spam and scam all of his friends for a week before Instagram took it down. And I mean, they're dealing with this on a widespread basis. So we see a lot of that happening. If you see like someone maybe you haven't talked to in a while, maybe you talk to all the time, and they message you something on Instagram, you're like, this is kind of out of character and out of the normal for this person. Shoot them a text, right? Hey, did you send this? Hey, what's going on? Hey, is your account hacked? Because this happens a lot. And we've had companies like restaurants and retail companies that have actually had their Instagram hacked, and then they started posting links on their Instagram from malware. So now it's like, well, now you have customers that are looking at your Instagram account and you're infecting them with malware, which is never something that you want to do. In every single case that we've looked at, the common denominator is that person did not have two-factor authentication on their social media accounts. If you, in this day and age, in almost 2023, if you don't have two-factor on absolutely everything, I don't know what you're doing. And I remember like I called my friend on Saturday. I'm like, hey, did you have two-factor? He's like, no, I don't. Like, that's so annoying. I don't use that on anything. I'm like, what is wrong with you? Like I had a come to Jesus moment with him. Like, just people, you know what I do? People get hacked all the time. This is the number one thing that we're seeing. He finally turned it on for everything. But the two main takeaways from that is two-factor on everything, and then make sure you use unique passwords for every single service. Because what attackers will do is if they find out your password for Instagram, Well, people like to use the same password for everything. So they'll be like, oh, I wonder if they use this for Facebook, for their bank account, for their corporate network. And they'll start using that password for a bunch of different services. So yeah, please turn that on if you don't have that on. And then Tinder phishing was an interesting one. I'm a little old for for this kind of stuff, but I was reading a research article that another researcher made about this, and I have single friends, and one of them's Adam, and a guy named Adam, and I messaged Adam like, hey, like, is Tinder phishing and like bots is a real thing? And he said, yeah, about 50% of the people he matches on Tinder are bots. And I'm like, well, how do you know they're bots? He's like, well, the first telltale sign is they're like 15s out of 10. He's like, they're just way out of my league and they match me. And I'm like, there is no way this person would match me if they weren't a bot. He's like, and the second thing, like, is they always send really spammy things, and it's like they try to get your phone number, then they try to text you on WhatsApp, and they try to get you to communicate with them somewhere outside of Tinder before that account gets deleted. So that's a pretty good telltale sign. He told me about one, and I actually had to look it up and find more information on it. It's called Tinder Match Check. And what hackers are doing is they're making fake accounts on Tinder, matching mostly men, and they're like, hey, yeah, let's meet up for drinks, whatever. Oh, before you do that, I want to make sure you're not a serial killer. So can you go to tindermatchcheck.com and just verify your identity? It takes like 30 seconds. So people go on this, they verify their identity. To verify your identity, you need to log in with 3 different types of social media, right? So you log in with Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Well, now the hacker has access to basically all your social media accounts, and that day is not going to happen, unfortunately. So this is a pretty common hack that we're seeing as well. And this kind of leads into a bigger issue, especially in the online dating world, which is called dating site extortion or sextortion scams. And there are absolutely tons of stories about this. I actually had a friend of a friend, this was years ago. He worked for a defense contractor, and he called me up. He's like, hey, man, I got to talk to you. I got a problem. He was on Tinder. He matched this girl. It was like Thanksgiving Eve. They actually had a pretty good story. She's like, oh yeah, I'm from out of town, but I came home for Thanksgiving. And she requested, explicit pictures of him. He sent them. And as soon as you do that, the whole tone changes. They're like, hey, you gotta send me $5,000 in Bitcoin or I'm leaking this to everyone. And he's like, she doesn't even know anyone. He's like, and then she started taking screenshots, or I say she, right? It's really some guy in India. It's a he. He started taking screenshots of his Facebook page, his LinkedIn page, his parents, his employer. And he realized, like, oh my God, on my Tinder profile, I say where I work. I have a link to my Instagram profile. Like, these people know exactly who you are as soon as you match them. So if they get an explicit picture, they can just say, all right, it's basically ransom, right? If you don't send me $5,000, I'm sending this to everyone. So he called me. He's like, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And I'm like, honestly, man, I don't know. Let me do some research. And my initial gut was like, these people don't send these pictures to anyone. There's a Reddit site, it's called Sextortion, where it's all stories of sextortion victims. And they actually will send it. Like, if you don't pay them, they'll send it to people. So he called me after he already paid him $5,000, and they're like, oh, that was for the first picture. The second picture is $2,000. He's like, are you kidding me? The biggest issue there was he had a security clearance. So this can be, if someone's extorting you or they have something over you of power, it's a big deal in the government. It's like, well, what if he gives up government secrets? Like, what if he gives up, details on our newest, nuclear reactor or something like that? So he had to report that to his work. Nothing happened, thankfully, but yeah, it was a very stressful time. But this happens all the time to a bunch of people. I mean, we've seen it time and time again. I'll do a conference at like a for like a chamber of commerce, and I'll talk about this, and I'll have a line of 8 people at the end, be like, oh my God, that happened to someone I know, or that happened to a friend, or yeah, it was bad. Probably the craziest one was like when Ashley Madison got hacked. I'll never forget this. I had an office downtown, and a hacker downloaded the database and started extorting people, being like, hey, if you don't pay me $10,000, I'm gonna send a message to your wife telling her you're on Ashley Madison, and here's the credit card transaction of you buying it, and here's your account, here's the messages you sent. And I get to the office early, like 6 a.m. And I got there at 6 a.m. This guy was waiting outside of my office. And I'm like, can I help you? He's like, oh my God, you got to help me. You got to help me. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? He was freaking out. I'm like, dude, there's nothing. Like, I can't delete what's on the internet. Like, you better pray this guy doesn't call your wife. Like, I don't know what to tell you. But yeah, it was bad. It was bad. And there's actually I haven't watched it yet. I think it's out. I think it came out February 2nd last year. It might be this year, but it's called The Tinder Swindler. It's about a group. There's 3 men in South Africa, And all they would do is they'd go on Tinder and scam men, with sextortion scams and all sorts of things. They made millions of dollars doing this. But these are the type of, I don't watch a lot of TV. I'm a big documentary guy, but haven't gotten to this one yet. But my friend said it's really, really good. So highly recommend you guys check that out if you're interested. LinkedIn phishing has also been taking off. So like, and I'm sure Mike gets this all the time too, but like I get so many fake recruiters on LinkedIn messaging me. I get people like women, new accounts messaging me like, hey, great to connect. Hope you have a splendid week. I haven't figured out what the scam is there yet, but there's got to be something because I'm like, this is just, and it's just like my inbox is full of them. I wish I took a screenshot of it, but like, I got to figure that one out. But there's a big recruiting scam going on LinkedIn now. And a lot of this is people applying for jobs with fake resumes or fake recruiting managers trying to recruit other people. And one of the biggest ones that we saw was, right when COVID first hit, when vaccines were being developed, what attackers were doing in China and Russia is they'd make fake recruiting profiles and they'd start messaging scientists at all these places on LinkedIn, being like, hey, not sure if you're looking for a job, but I have a remote work opportunity. You can make $1.7 million, right? Some crazy astronomical figure. Are you interested? Of course, gonna be like, yeah, can you send me more info? Well, on LinkedIn, they'll send them a Word document. Here's the job recs. That Word document has malware in it. Someone opens up, this actually happened, opened it up on their work computer. That's how these foreign countries got in and got information relating to the vaccine, was through these type of phishing emails. It wasn't through email, right? Because they knew, hey, email controls are probably pretty good. It was through social media, it was through LinkedIn. So big threat avenue there. There's big malware in 2022 called More Eggs, and it was the reverse. It was job applicants finding, job listings on LinkedIn for companies, them emailing that company or messaging that company on LinkedIn saying, hey, I'm really interested in your position. My resume is uploaded on jamesresume.com. Can you go and take a look? They'll click on it, they'll download it, it'll install malware, and that's how they're getting their initial foothold in a lot of these networks. So it's really from there's people, hiring managers scamming applicants and applicants scamming hiring managers. So it's a little bit of a two-way street there. So what do they do? Like, when you start downloading things and you start clicking on links, what is the malware want, or what does the attacker want you to do? Typically, it's either click a link and enter a password. So the link and the password will look like it's like Microsoft. It might look like it's Amazon or a social media site. It'll prompt for a password. The second thing is they'll download what's called a maldoc, and that's just a malicious Word document, or download a malicious email or another kind of malicious file extension. And from an attacking standpoint, just like companies have tools to make their life easier, hackers have tools to make their life easier, and it's developed by other hackers. So one of this is called Evil Proxy. It's what's called FAST, phishing as a service. So if I'm a hacker, I go, you know what? I just don't want to spend the time to create a phishing website and create all the infrastructure to send out spam emails. I can go to another hacker and be like, hey, I'll pay you $25 a month to rent your infrastructure and all your stuff, and they'll gladly do it. So they have customers, right? It's the hacking overlords have their little peasant hackers that subscribe to their services, and they send out all these phishing emails. Yeah, you can use our platform, $25 a month, just like you use file sharing. Very, very similar to that. The second tool, and this is a tool, it's on the internet, you can download it, helps pack malware into those Word documents. So when you open that Word document, your computer gets infected. It's called Evil Clippy. You guys remember like Clippy from like the late 90s, early 2000s, but it's actually pretty entertaining. Like they have a little video on it when you download it, and like Evil Clippy's like taking over like regular Clippy, and it's like it's entertaining. Don't download it, but I could just take my word for it. Very entertaining, very entertaining. But you can actually okay, what kind of file format do you want? You want Excel doc? You want a Word doc? What do you want the malware to do? You can just select, I want it to, open a payload. I want to steal a password. Very easy to use. And then at the end, it generates that malicious document that the attackers can use to send to you on LinkedIn or MySpace or whatever else you're using. And we just went over, really a couple of the different platforms out there. Especially kids nowadays are using things like WhatsApp. Discord is huge. Like I never realized how massive Discord was, especially amongst like the gaming community before. Like I hired an intern, and he was like, dude, everyone's on Discord now. Like there's companies on Discord, Telegram, right? All these different messaging apps. and a lot of them are untraceable. So we just did a job recently with a company that they bought cargo, or they're transporting cargo from Mexico, and the person had a Telegram number, and he was messaging them, and the cargo was supposed to go to Rochester, New York, didn't show up. They hired us to do an investigation on the company that he was using to transport this cargo. Turned out the company was actually transporting drugs for the cartel. And he's like, well, I'm like, how are you messaging this guy? He's like, on Telegram, like nothing legit happens on Telegram. Like if you're using Telegram, like not a whole lot of good stuff happens there. So we did investigations, and I'm like, yeah, and we ended up working with the DEA, and they're like, yeah, this is very consistent with smuggling drugs. So those apps, if you have kids using them, or we recommend blocking it from an employee perspective, but especially if you have kids or relatives using these apps, it's really the Wild West out there. One of the biggest issues we're seeing, especially with the work from home post-COVID, is the blurred lines between personal life and work life. When you used to go to work, I remember, when I worked in like cubicles, right? You go to work and it's like, well, I can't check my Facebook because my boss is going to walk by, or like, oh, I can't be doing that at work. And I actually, I got to look busy. It's like when you work from home, you don't got to do that anymore, right? You can be on one screen watching the Kardashians, on the other screen, playing World of Warcraft, and then have a little email browser up to keep your Teams notification lit. And that's like kind of the norm for a lot of employees now. And now they're like, well, I can use my work computer for personal stuff because there's no one monitoring me, right? A lot of times it's like, we do forensics, and I'm like, how could this person install Fortnite on a work computer? Like, honestly, we've never had it happen before. I'm like, well, did you do anything? No, we didn't. We thought it couldn't happen because no one ever tried it, because everyone was in the office. No one had the courage to actually play Fortnite in the office. But when you're working from home, no one's watching you. So these are big problems now that companies are running into that they never really knew was a problem before. And one of that is shared computers. So people using work computers for personal social media. So, for example, if you're in HR, right, you might be doing invoicing, you might be doing benefits, a bunch of things that have sensitive information. We had a case where someone actually, they had tons of sensitive info on their computer. They were in HR, they did accounts payable, they did operations, and they let their kid log into their personal Instagram account, and they logged into it, and they got some really spammy link from one of their friends, and they opened it, and it just completely infected their computer. And I'm like, well, like, you let them go to their personal Instagram account on work computer? Like, yeah, we didn't know that was a problem. We know people were doing that. And it just goes, it's the whole remote work thing. People are doing things behind your back that you don't know they're doing, and you need to make sure that you have the proper protections in place to stop them from doing that, or at least say, hey, this person tried to go to this site. Probably shouldn't have done that, right? Probably should have been alerted on that. And we see this stuff happen all the time. And that goes from a personal Instagram account to now a reportable security breach. And you don't want to be the person that the company had to report to all their customers that their data was taken because you were on your personal Instagram account checking, I don't know, Kim Kardashian's story or something like that. Usually not a good look. This is a very common thing we're seeing now. It's called BEC, business email compromise. And what's happening is it's basically malicious email forwarding. What attackers are doing is, we just had this happen last week to a glass company that called us. Like, hey, our accountants emailed us and said, hey, did you send this form for redirected funds? Like, we're going to pay you, but it's a bank in Russia. Like, do you guys do any banking in Russia? Like, no, we don't do any banking in Russia. What the attackers did is, there's two things. The first thing they did is they found a password that was in use for an email account. Again, customer was not using two-factor, logged into the email account, and they waited for months. And we looked at the logs. They were in this email account for months waiting for a financial transaction. They finally found one, created a rule that forwarded those emails to a different email account, one that they control, and started responding to the attacker that way. So they're like, hey, we got to wire some money. Where do you want us to wire it? They see it, take that, move it out of that email account, start communicating with that customer, and they say, this is the new bank information. And that's how they tried to, it was like $1.3 million they tried to get. And we've seen a lot of these be successful. The other one that they did, which I thought was honestly really good, was they tried to hire fake employees. So they got a hold of the person in HR, find out they were using like an outsource, like a Paychex or a payroll company, and they actually sent the person an email and said, hey, we're hiring 4 new employees. Here's their W-2s. And the W-2s were legit people in that city and their social security number. So, and I looked it up. They were legitimate identities and people. And the bank accounts they wanted their paychecks to go to were all like offshore bank accounts. So the only way that this could have happened is if this company was also doing social, identity theft. Like they were stealing people's identity. They're saying, how can we scam more people with this? And now they're trying to hire fake employees for companies by hacking them. But they actually caught it. Like, yeah, we don't like. Why would you want a Russian bank account for this person in Rochester, New York? Like this just doesn't make sense. So they caught it, which was good, which was really good. And we had this happen. Like I'll never forget this job because it was a very I guess you call it hostile phone call because of then blaming who was at fault here. But there was a construction company, a gas station that we worked with, and what happened was the hackers hacked the construction company's CFO's email, stayed in there for 7 months, waited for the gas station. The construction company was building a bunch of gas station chains for this gas station all along roads and things like that. Huge project. And finally, they're like, okay, we're ready to make our first payment. It was like $4 million for all the work that they did and half of the work that they were going to do. And the hackers redirected the funds in like the last hour and said, no, send it to this account. No checks went through. The wire, they actually intercepted the wire, the first wire, for $2 million to an offshore account. And they sat down like, well, who's at fault here? Is it the construction company for getting hacked, or is it the gas station company for wiring funds to Russia? Like, they shouldn't be wiring funds to Russia. And it was actually a pretty big battle of, well, is the company that got hacked at fault, or is the company that wired funds to Russia at fault? I don't know where it ended up, but these are discussions that you don't want to have with your customers or your vendors, right? These are bad discussions. This was a crazy one, and it was, really, it was right in the fall, and I met this guy, and we started talking. He was just, I met him at a networking event. He just started a company. He hired his first intern. And like a week later, he was like, you ever hear of this? And he started sending me screenshots. And the screenshots are the intern got a text message like, hey, this is Frank, the CEO. I'm doing a conference. Can you buy some gift cards for me? And this is the dreaded, infamous gift card scam. This happens all the time. And the kid responded. You can see this email chain. He ends up going and buying gift cards. And he was in New York. And it was when I don't know if you guys remember, there was like the guy on the subway that like threw the gas grenade and like had the gun and stuff. So all the subways were shut down. He's like, hey, I can't get to the store. He went to like Fordham. I can't get to the store because all the subways are shut down. He's like, that's fine. I can wait. I got time. So he went out, sent screenshots, bought the gift cards, sent the guy the gift cards. It was 3 eBay gift cards. It was like $1,500 or something like that. And he got them. And then 20 minutes later, you can see on the right screenshot, he says, hey, are you still at the store? He goes, I'm near. I just went to my school building. It's pouring rain. He goes, okay, do you need me to go back to the store? He's like, yeah, I need more gift cards. I need 5 more gift cards. So the guy actually went to the store, bought more gift cards. He texted back like, hey, this is, way above my credit limit. Like, I don't know if I can afford it. Like, are you guys going to reimburse me for this? Like, oh yeah, just use your debit card. There's no limit on your debit card. Just use that. We'll reimburse you. So like the next day he calls Frank, the actual CEO. I was like, hey, where did I submit my expense report for all those gift cards? He's like, what gift cards are you talking about? And that started the battle of, well, should they reimburse him, right? He got phished, right? It wasn't anything to do with the company. It was a personal phish. Yeah, he used his manager's identity, but should he be reimbursed? And these are the type of social media posts that these attackers take advantage of. Like these welcome posts, right? You go on LinkedIn, you go on Facebook, and you start saying, oh, we got a new employee. She's going to be doing, recruiting for us. Here's some more information about her. Attackers see this and they go, these are prime candidates for these types of scams. My brother is a partner at a financial institution in Syracuse, and he was at the office, and an intern was at the office. And he's like, yeah, the intern works 8 to 4 every day. He's like, it's 1:30, and the intern gets up from his desk, and Dave's like, where are you going?'s like, oh, Craig texted me, and he told me that he's at a conference, and he has to buy gift cards for him. He's like, Craig asked you to buy gift cards? Like, yeah, Craig's working from home today. And he's like, if I didn't ask him where he was going, this kid would have went down the street and bought $500 of Amazon gift cards and sent them to this guy that he thought was Craig. So this stuff happens all the time, all the time. All right. And you guys probably get a lot of these emails where they're fake Amazon emails where, it's like, hey, here's your tracking information. Hey, you had a suspicious login from Japan on your Amazon account. Click here to reset your password. Hey, you got a postal notice that this package can't be delivered. Around this time of year, you will get hammered with these messages. And like, the common theme of this presentation, attackers use texting because there's no spam filter on your text message. There's no corporate controls on your text message. Your email there is, right? These things won't come through on an email on a lot of our customers' emails, but you talk about your phone and your text message, these things will come right through. So be on the lookout for anything like this. I think there's a couple pieces of software out there that do monitor, like part of MDM and mobile device management, that will look at text messages and see if they're spam. So if you have like corporate phones that you give to employees, those will help at least identify and then alert you if something like this happens. These are actually all text messages I got in a 1 week span. And I have like this on my computer too. So I'm just like all day looking at my computer getting blown up with these malicious text messages. The weird part is this is from M&T Bank. I actually used to bank at M&T Bank. I'm like, I don't know how they knew I was banking there, but that was a little bit concerning. But yeah, all complete spam. And then there's, of course, the dreaded IRS phone calls, right? And if you get a call from the IRS and they say that you owe $15,000 in back taxes, please, for the love of God, do not pay them. This happens all the time, right around tax season. And I always tell this story. And like, one time I was a young student and I was doing my own taxes and I used TurboTax, and I'm like, I just realized if I change these numbers in TurboTax, my refund gets a lot bigger. So I'm going in through the software, I'm changing all the numbers. I had like a $8,000 refund. I think I made 20 grand that year, something insane. And I'm like, submitted it. And I got a letter in the mail. It's like, hey, actually, your house isn't a church, so you can't write that off on your taxes. Like I broke every rule in the IRS and they still didn't give me a phone call. It's like, I don't think they're going to call you. They're probably going to send you something in the mail. If they do call you, it usually doesn't sound like they're in a call center in India, right? It's just not like that. So yeah, you will get these phone calls at some point in your life, and probably within the next year. Please don't pay those attackers. The other big one we're seeing is Facebook reviews. So people, let's say they do work with a bank, they leave a really great Facebook review because they loved working with that bank, and they disclose so much information. So this is a review. I actually just pulled this up online. This lady's talking about how she worked with a financial advisor. Her daughter Jessica referred them. The person was very knowledgeable. They communicate through email. They have in-person meetings, the name of that person, the department they're in, the branch they work at. Well, if I'm an attacker and I read that, like, well, now I know the person that they work with. I know where this person's located. I know that they take, appointment and give out information through email. I could call this person I can call the branch manager as the employee, and I might be able to get some information out of that. And we did this as a test for we work with a lot of registered investment advisory firms. We did this as a test, and I think there's only one that caught us. Like the other one was like, oh yeah, great to hear from you. What do you need? Oh, okay, you need a new account statement. Where do you want me to email it to? Oh, great. And they'll email it right to you. So a lot of lacking of controls, especially in a lot of small to medium-sized businesses for that. And this is all because of a Google review. And we actually did a poll for a lot of investment advisory firms, said, hey, do any of you guys actually have policies and procedures in place to stop this? And only one of them said that they did. I'm like, so what happens if like a customer calls you and they need account information? Like, we just give it. Like, we don't, like, they don't even, I'm like, do they talk to the advisor? No, they talk to the receptionist. Like, we just give them the information. I'm like, yeah, you probably shouldn't be doing that. You probably should be verifying them. Like, you know what, James? Not a bad idea. Maybe we should be doing that. I'm like, yeah, it's not good. All right, one more thing I want to touch on is deep fakes. And I was going to create a deep fake of Mike during this presentation, but I just didn't have the time because I thought it'd be hilarious. I didn't know what I wanted to say, first of all. I'm like, I don't know. But deep fakes are becoming, and AI are becoming really, really common. And there's actually professional deep fake services that businesses can buy. One's called Synthesia. What it's actually intended for it is, let's say you have a multilingual audience. You work in Spain, in I don't know, like the United States, you do work in Germany. You can actually take a picture of yourself and you can put it on Synthesia, and it'll convert all your stuff in your mouth movement in a different language. So you can create marketing videos in each language that you want, but it's still like the CEO or the face of the company doing it. There's a GitHub project called Deepface Lab where you can actually go and download it and then upload videos and put people's faces on things. And it's super, super accurate. It's actually so accurate. There is there's a crypto company called Binance. And what an attacker did is they created a fake email account for the COO, Patrick Hillman, and they sent it to a bunch of investors, a bunch of people on LinkedIn. It's like, this is a new report we're releasing. And on the call was a deepfake of Pat Hillman. He went through a 30-minute presentation. Only one person reached out on LinkedIn and was like, hey, I just want to confirm that like we had that Zoom meeting. He's like, that wasn't me. Like, yeah, it was a deepfake. So hackers are using deepfakes to scam people. And this is becoming more and more common. It's so easy to make a deepfake. There is a case in Pennsylvania where a woman's child didn't make the cheerleading team. She went online, made a deepfake of these other girls saying super vulgar things, and then emailed it to the superintendent. It was like, how can you let these girls on the team? Like, look what they're saying. And it was a big thing. Like, yeah, it wasn't us. And they had to hire a forensic company to come in and be like, yeah, these videos are deepfakes. Like the signature goes to like Synthesia. Like they're not real videos. So yeah, this stuff happens all the time. Kidnappings, fake kidnappings, right? If your kid has Instagram, hackers are taking the picture, putting a deep fake on them when they go to school, sending it to the parent, and the kid saying like, "Oh my God, I'm kidnapped. Send them 50 grand," and parents are paying it. This stuff happens, so it's crazy, absolutely insane. I never thought 2 years ago that we'd be seeing something like this, but the technology's out there and it's only getting better. It's actually such a big deal. DHS, Department of Homeland Security, released a statement on the dangers of deepfake this year. So it's only getting more and more scary. All right, well, that concludes Friend Zoned. Hope you guys enjoyed it. A lot of really good information there. Hopefully some really good takeaways for you, not just from a personal level, but also a business level. And I'll hand it back over to Ted.
So where do we go from here? Michael, that's your job. Let's educate clients and prospective clients on what do we do next.
All right, so how do you get out of the friend zone? We don't have a ton of time, but I'll rip through a couple of things here. So number one, there are security minimum standards that every organization needs to put in place. We don't have time to go through all of them today, but at the end of the slide, I have my information there, email that you can reach out to. We'll put some questions in the chat here that, again, but as far as getting into deep detail on these, you can email me and we can set up another time to talk about them. As James mentioned, next-gen AV EDR is really critical these days. You don't want to be using old signature-based antivirus solutions. So if you do click on that malware link, the expectation is that these next-gen EDR solutions are 99+% effective against stopping that malware if you do click on them. So a good way to stop them right there in their tracks. But if all else should fail, you need to make sure you have a really good business continuity and DR plan. So if stuff gets stolen or cryptoed or whatnot, it's how do you recover from that situation? And you can detail a plan from the smallest mundane thing to how do I restore a single file to how do I get all my entire systems back up and running again. For that, we like to use Datto, both from a server standpoint and also from a cloud backup standpoint if you're using Google or Microsoft. Next one is some enhanced security solutions that we deploy at our clients. I'll focus on MDR today, Managed Detection and Response. So we talked a little bit about the endpoint detection response. I'm going to scroll through this one, and now I want to jump into the MDR section. So what Managed Detection and Response looks at is what are you doing in your computer? What's happening in email? What's happening on the other SaaS-based applications? What's happening on the network? What are the logs that are collecting from the firewall? And it aggregates all of those things together and says, okay, one of these things by itself, maybe not a big deal. But if I start plugging this and this together, you guys might be in trouble. So this aggregates all that data, and then we'll start alerting us as your provider, or you as the client if you have your own security team, to tell you, this is a level X event, you need to jump on it right away, you've been hacked, or this is something you really want to look into. but this is really high level a SIEM SOC solution that's gonna give you way more data as to what's happening in your environment than just a standard antivirus solution. And as I mentioned, data for if all else fails. I wanted to leave a little bit of time for questions, so I buzzed through this. But I did want to talk about one other thing in our security minimum standards. We can't stress it enough. Two-factor authentication has to happen. You have to have two-factor authentication on everything that you use. And when we started looking at products, even as many as 6 years ago, we're not allowing new products at NENS or for our clients that don't have two-factor in. Unfortunately, there still are a lot of products out there that don't offer two-factor authentication. It's not ready for enterprise. It's not ready for your business, and I wouldn't go to it. So if you're looking at different products, I would definitely make sure that that's like top on your list of making sure that it has that, or just take it off the list and move on to the next system. So with that said, I want to leave a little bit of time for questions.
So for our audience, please put questions through for James or Michael. But let's tackle, so Michael, maybe back on MDR, tell us about, like, in a real world scenario, if an employee was breached, how does the MDR solution, managed detection and response, how does it help either you as the service provider or the client react? And tell us about, like, a common scenario there.
Yeah, I mean, the things that are really good to look at that happen quite often is things called impossible travel. So where if somebody is breached, where say they're in Rochester, New York, but then all of a sudden they log in from San Francisco, California, or some other country within that same hour, they know that you can't get from New York to San Francisco or some other country in that same hour. So that's going to kick off an alert and say, hey, something happened here. There's no way that this person logged on from these two different locations within this time frame. So then we immediately were reaching out to that end user, trying to figure out, did you get phished? Did did your credentials end up on the dark web somewhere? And then we're putting the incident response plan in place to how do we mitigate that? Is there anybody else that could have gotten hacked at the same time? And then we're moving along to try to rectify it. The other thing that the MDR looks for is data exfiltration is really big. So it's looking to see, is this user shipping data out of the environment at a rate that is not accustomed, that they're not accustomed to, right? So this user will typically, upload, a couple hundred megs in a day. And thus far today, they've already sent 2 gigs of data out of the organization. So that's going to kick off an alert and say, this user is sending a ton of data out of the organization. Is this normal activity? You should probably go look into this. And then there are things that are just absolutely 100% red flags, where it's seeing that on these, from multiple IPs and different ports, like all these things are happening in the environment, and they know that this is really bad, and they just tell you right away, you need to go look into this. In some cases, depending on how you have your MDR configured, it'll actually automatically block those ports and those transmissions from continuing. So once it gets to a certain level, depending on how you have your sensor set up, it'll stop that traffic from traversing the environment, from traversing the network.
Okay. Well, I think we're just about out of time, but I think that the key message that James delivered is that despite all of the tools we have in place, despite all of the cybersecurity awareness training employees are going through more routinely now, there are so many additional places where people can get exploited, especially on social media sites, on dating sites, the blurring of the personal and work lives. So we just have to be vigilant. We have to, stay in the fight for educating people. Today's session will be recorded, and you can find it on the NENS YouTube channel, and we'll send out copies of the presentation. So if anyone enjoyed today's presentation and you want to share it with people on your team, please do share the content, because a lot of this stuff is news to people until they become a victim. And what we want to do is make sure people understand in advance all the different ways they can be exploited. But the good news is the team at NENS has additional layers of defense. Managed detection and response is a big one. in the tool set today. And of course, one of the last lines of defense is a really robust backup and disaster recovery and business continuity solution in the form of Datto. So all of these tools help mitigate all these challenges, but we have to work together, clients, service providers, vendors, experts, to fight the bad guys. So with that, I want to thank James Carroll from Hackett Cyber for joining us for this informative discussion today. Please reach out to Michael and the team at NENS with questions and follow-up action items. Michael, thanks for joining us as well. And this concludes another NENS quarterly webinar, and we look forward to seeing you in the new year.